Great. Hi all, welcome to the September 13th meeting of the VTCC. I have already started going through roll call to update our sheet. So the first order of business would be to submit last month's meeting notes for submission, unless there's any comments or wanted revisions. Okay, I will submit those as is. And I don't know, Dax, if you want to go into the few announcements that we have.
Yes. One of the announcements that I wanted to just make briefly for everybody is due to just the ongoing COVID issues that we're experiencing in the community. What we kind of felt was in the best interest is we go ahead and delay meeting in person again until 2022. We keep the meetings virtual. I don't want to put anyone at risk or at potential risk for doing anything until I think we have a little bit better understanding of just overall safety for everybody and in kind of in all of our best interests. So I know we had talked about doing something in October. And then I think if we try and do something November to December, we're into holidays and other time with family and other things. So I wanted to put that, but just kind of in front of everybody and let everyone know we're just going to delay that just a bit in the hopes that we get a little bit more development and better trends with our COVID reporting of what's going on right now. The other, I think right now, there was one other piece here. My apologies. I'm looking through a few of my different notes. Outside of that, I think everything else we're going to be covering throughout our agenda today. If there is anything that I come across or stumble through inside of my notes, I'll share that a little bit later at the conclusion of our meeting. All right. And I apologize, Adrian. It looks like, do we have any, I think Vera will be doing our attendance.
No, well, we're handling that in the background. But I think the other thing is citizens to be heard. I don't know who would answer that question if there are currently any requests for that.
Pete, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Dr. Alloway, we currently do not have any citizens to be heard.
Okay.
Great. So our item for our next item would be an update on Keep SA Moving. And Leroy, is that something that you're going to be the one providing us today?
Yes, and thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
My apologies. Before we get into that, we just need to approve the meeting minutes.
I did that too.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, I was having some audio issues. Never mind. Thanks.
Not a problem. We just wanted to do a quick verbal update for the Community Council on the Keep SA Moving projects at this moment. And to let you know that at the end of August, VIA received word that we have officially been accepted into what's called project development for the north-south ART line with the Federal Transit Administration. What this means is not only is it the first time in the history of our agency that we're advancing a project through the capital investment grant process, but from the moment we were accepted into the pipeline, we now have the ability to start counting any money we spend on development of ART north-south as part of our local match for the overall program. So it does start a timeline for us of approximately 2 years to get through project development. You will be hearing more about that in the coming weeks and months. And of course, we'll be bringing more information to the Community Council as this continues to unfold. But it was a very big day for the agency. I don't know if, I know Mr. Herrera is on the line. I don't know if he'd like to add anything on that point before we go into the VIA Link expansion.
Thank you, Leroy. I just wanted to, again, just to give a sense of where we are related to where we are in these months of now September, where we had originally designed or circled September as the ideal month of where we would be hitting the ground with ridership recovery and moving towards a ridership recovery effort on all fronts. Obviously, there has been changes to that plan out of our control, out of all of our control, from the community standpoint as it relates to the Delta variant as with the pandemic. But that said, we have seen a steady increase. The good news is we've seen a slow increase as on our service levels of ridership, not as fast as we'd like to see, obviously, to get our ridership back to where it was once pre-COVID. But we believe, again, that will come along with consumer confidence gaining some steam as we move past this Delta variant. The second piece of this really then is if we are in a position of now having a focus on our workforce, and we call it a recovery of our workforce. The recovery of our workforce really is about not only understanding the impact that the pandemic has had on our labor and our ability to have consistent labor delivering service on the streets, but then also how it is indeed a changed atmosphere on how we're attracting employees to become members of our team. That has indeed become a challenge, not only for us here in San Antonio, but for all of transit across the United States, as much as also other businesses in San Antonio and across the United States. We're attracting employees to come on board has become a new challenge for many customers, many companies, VIA included with that. So you'll probably be hearing from us over the course of the next 60 to 90 days, more activity around the campaigns about recovering our workforce, as we call it, and any help that the VTCC could give us towards that, getting the word out, knowing people that might be looking for jobs, that we have jobs that are posted, and getting this word out as much as possible as we can as it relates to great opportunities that we have for employment here at our agency. So more of that to come, but we wanted to start getting this information out to the VTCC so you can see where we're heading here in the near future. Leroy?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, it does appear we have a hand raised with Mr. Day.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the question, since it's getting harder to attract employees, have VIA ever thought about reopening its daycare? For starters.
That's
my question.
I think that's a great question. I have not heard that specifically, but I do believe that, well, not that in particular, but there's no reason why we shouldn't look at something like that. There are programs, to your point, exactly. There are currently programs that we were just asking about last week, Leroy, that were coming from the Texas Workforce Commission. So the Texas Workforce Commission has designated certain industries where they could get their employees' daycare costs covered by the Texas Workforce Commission. Transit was not included in that tranche of available grants and dollars. So we are asking those kind of questions. But back to your point, daycare clearly seems to be an issue with attracting folks back to the workforce. So I'll make a note of that and bring that up to the powers that be here. But great question.
Okie dokie. That seems to be one of the issues I keep on hearing on Breaking Points. It's a show I listen to online in the morning.
Very good point. I could tell you I have an employee who went through that daycare, now is employed with us. So it even pays dividends for employees later in their lifetimes. They went through the daycare and then now they're working for us. So it's on two fronts. But great question. We'll definitely follow up on that.
Mr. Roberts has his hand raised.
I was wondering that this is really also for Dax and Leroy, but did we want to address that in the subcommittee? In the policy and programming subcommittee and offer up some suggestions back to the VTCC?
Yes, Jeremy, I think that makes a ton of sense. Leveraging resources from the community or even discussing in a little bit more of a freeform fashion what we've learned out of the private sector and being citizens from our networks and other parts of the community, how we can maybe help
Okay.
get the word out or share. So yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Okay. I actually, for the gentleman that was presenting, I could even have a one-off call with you to just get the lowdown of exactly current situation, pain points, and what you're trying to solve for. And that way it gives us parameters to really work around as we start to come up with some ideas.
Absolutely, Jeremy. Well, I'll reach out to you and we'll coordinate some time.
Fantastic. Thank you.
We do have one other hand raised. KJ, I'm sorry, I'm trying to not butcher your last name today. And you're still on mute.
How about that? It's like federal. It's pretty easy.
Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I just was curious to know if you're partnering at all with the city's job training program and maybe SA Works as young kids are coming out of school to, understand that various opportunities that are available.
I know not directly, unless you know of any, Leroy, of any connection with with the city's training program, but that I do know that our HR department was going to reach out to them. KJ, I'll find out what that answer was and where it is. CDL, the commercial driver's license, that's the key piece that we're looking for as operators. And that's the piece. Our economy changed during COVID, where now everybody is a driver and can be a driver. And those drivers are getting paid very well. Regional drivers to local drivers to transportation. Think about it, from Amazon to UPS to FedEx to Ubers and the like, even though Uber's not necessarily CDL, but those folks that are definitely competing on CDL that weren't competing there before, we're seeing that pressure, and we're seeing that on our workforce.
That makes sense. I hear Amazon stealing all the drivers. Even we're struggling, so I get it.
No, and restaurants, all aboard. I just recently heard Starbucks was offering free college education to their what do they call it, baristas?
Yes.
And that was, while it's online education, it's still college education. And as long as you stay with them and work with them, they'll pay for your online college courses. It's incredible the lengths now that the industries, the different industries are going to attract employees back. So we look forward to having this discussion with the subcommittee and then formulating some ideas for this committee to consider.
Thank you.
And then the last update we had under the Keep SA Moving was just to let the community council know that today was the soft launch for Via Link Express going from the city of Sandy Oaks to the Brooks Transit Center. We will be out in the city of Sandy Oaks on Saturday, taking part in their community yard sale, monthly community event to help promote this service. But if you do know anyone in the city of Sandy Oaks, please let them know that Monday through Friday from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., they do have access to the Via Link Express service that will get them to Brooks Transit Center. And from there, they're able to take advantage of the rest of the transit system we have. And those are the updates on Keep SA Moving. Glad to go ahead and move straight into the next item if that's the pleasure of the council.
Yeah, please continue, Dr. Alloway.
So this is a presentation we held over from last month. We originally had planned to bring this to you in August. Given the amount of discussion we had last month, we didn't want to shrink this one down because it is a great success story and we're glad to be sharing it with you. So we pleased to share with you the results that we saw from our June 2021 fixed route customer survey. Over the next few slides, we'll walk through what our consultant TransPro has reported back to us and how that compares to other members of their that are using their service. They again are a national consulting firm, one of the preeminent experts in transit consulting when it comes to this type of work. And so we're glad to be able to draw upon their benchmarking as well to see how we're rating locally compared with our peers across the country. So I know there have been questions in the past from the Community Council about how we structured the survey, what the significance of only asking people on board was versus a general community survey at this moment. And as John Gary mentioned, we are looking at not only a ridership recovery, but also a workforce recovery. And when we look at ridership recovery in particular, though, there's three components: our existing customer base, our former customers, and then new customers. For this survey, for this first volley, we're looking at existing customers. So individuals who were actively riding during the first week of June 2021 on board our fixed route bus system. This did not include our Via Trans system. They will have a separate survey later this year. And what we want to do to balance our ridership recovery is also look at how are we doing on a performance basis? What's our actual performance versus what people perceive to be our performance? There's tons of anecdotal evidence in the field today of individuals thinking, for example, that restaurant service may have declined when the reality is we're now more attuned to our phones than we are the service in the restaurant around us. And so our perception of time, perception of service starts varying differently when it may be the exact same service we've always had for years. We've just got additional stimuli that are coming in. So for the June customer service or customer experience survey, we were looking at existing customers and helping identify what their impression of performance is. So our methodology. This was a statistically valid survey. We did have a random sampling, and it was based on a proportional representation of ridership in the system. And our numbers were based off of our January 2021 actual performance. The reason we did that was it gave us a window to allow the system to stabilize after we'd made some changes. And so we could ensure that we weren't oversampling, say, our primo routes and ignoring our 30-minute or our 60-minute routes. So this did give a representative sample. We had 503 surveys that were completed. Now, there were more people approached on board, but 503 were actually completed, which gave us a 95% confidence level with a margin of error of plus or minus 4.4%. I know the natural inclination when we see data presented is to start dissecting it and really diving in and looking at what all the variations could be. I do want to caution, it's the same caution we presented to the VIA board. This is one data set at one point in time. While we could disaggregate the data, the margin of error in that case increases dramatically. And so it doesn't really show us a lot of statistical validity. This is a survey we will be doing on a periodic basis, so we will continue to build the data sets, but still keeping for that 95% confidence level and that same margin of error. The surveys were administered in both English and Spanish, and it was an intercept survey. So passengers were approached by a survey taker on board the bus with an iPad, asked if they would like to participate in the survey, and they were told up front that if they completed the survey, we would give them a day pass as an incentive to thank them for their participation. This is the same structure and format that TransPro has used throughout the country to get their results. So the key takeaways from the 503 respondents, and I'm sorry, I should point out, for those who are curious, we were in the field June 7th through June 13th. So the key takeaways. Well, nearly 9 out of 10 customers said they were satisfied with VIA service from our core ridership in June. Over half, approximately 54%, said service has gotten better in the last year. And what the community told us they were most satisfied with: the value VIA brings to the community, seating and spacing on the bus, VIA taking them to places where they need to go, the price being a good value. That is, we did ask a specific question about the price of a 2.5 hour pass and a day pass if the riders felt that was a good value. The ease of getting to bus stops, and then the overall temperature on the bus. Some of the survey questions are the routine questions Transpro asked across the country. We're trying to benchmark those. We did have some very specific VIA questions, and we'll point those out in the next few slides. One other big takeaway, though, was the community did tell us, or let me say our core ridership did tell us, that if we want to improve our service, where they see the room for improving is increasing our service frequency, increasing our hours of operation, and decreasing the travel time that it takes to be on board a vehicle. So looking at the customer profile, and again, we've routinely asked when we do our Who is the Rider survey, who's riding? What's that demographic look like? And so this is our profile as of June 2021. 56% male, 42% female. The majority of our clientele, though, 68% identify as Hispanic, Latino, or Mexican American. But this was perhaps the most eye-opening, was that 35% of our ridership reported having an annual household income under $10,000 a year as of June. Now, we've got the age distribution, the rest of the race, ethnicity, and I know the question that we also received from the board we wanted to share with the community council is, how does this compare with what we saw in 2019 when we did our Who is the Rider survey? Do we have a different demographic riding today versus then? So on a gender basis, it's still relatively stable. Had a majority male in 2019, the number has gone up slightly, but it's still a majority male ridership, at least as far as the respondents in this random sample. The age distribution has changed slightly. In 2019, we actually saw a higher peak with our 55 to 64-year-old respondents riding. Today, we're actually seeing a three-way tie between 35-year-olds up to 64-year-olds. So that 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, all telling us they're riding. That's approximately 60% of our ridership base as of June. Again, ethnicity, fairly stable overall, a slightly higher percentage of those riders who are identifying as Hispanic, Latino, or Mexican, but not abnormally high compared with what we saw in 2019. Now, in income, we did have to go to a higher threshold looking when reporting annual household income. But this one was a marked change. We know, we had a 35% reporting in household income under 10,000. When we look at under $24,999, so the threshold for poverty, 88% of our riders in 2021 told us in the Wave 1 survey that they are in a household with an income less than $25,000. 64% had told us that when we looked in 2019. So that was a data point that we're going to continue to explore and look at in future surveys, but I did want to share that with the community council that we do know who we're serving. And again, even with the pandemic, it has not changed the core makeup of our ridership. It still remains a service that we really are seeing people making less than $25,000 a year using in the community. Now, one other key takeaway is that we did have 92% of our respondents tell us they were dependent on using VIA to get to and from their destination. Now, please bear in mind, again, this is, we say our core ridership, but this is a reflection that we know through the pandemic, we've lost about 45% of our ridership. So the people that are riding today have been riding with us. We've known for a while, just looking at ridership trends, that they are transit reliant. This survey point confirmed it for us. What you see in the gray area on the screen is that the industry average, and this is based on TransPro's other transit clients, about 82% say that they are dependent on transit across the nation. We're slightly higher. Now, we did ask for that 8%, if they weren't dependent, if they had other options, what did that look like for them? And you can see again, 37% saying while they may have a car, the bus is convenient, that's why they choose to ride. 34% saying they wanted to save money on gas, parking, and other expenses. And then the numbers go down from there. 54% of our customers did tell us, though, that they use VIA primarily to get to and from work. 6% were saying it was for education. It does make sense that we would see a smaller educational percentage because this was in June. We did not have in-school classes happening throughout the community. So when we look to go out later this year, we're anticipating that we're going to see the education percentage go up, depending upon the COVID prevailing conditions at the time. And 65% of our customers told us they use VIA more than 5 days a week. 34% say they've been riding at least once a week for more than 5 years. This is, again, a data set that we want to continue to watch. The trend we had seen in prior surveys were people riding with us for about 2 to 3 years and then seeing a drop off. So we're seeing a longer group of riders today than we have in the years past. I'd like to pause at this moment before we get into the Net Promoter Score to see if there are any questions on what we've just discussed, or if there's anything that Mr. Herrera would like to add at this point.
Very well done, Dr. Alloway. Appreciate it.
I'm not seeing any questions, Mr. Chairman. Would you like us to go ahead and continue with the next section of this presentation?
Yeah, let's go ahead and continue. I'm sure. I think as we see the whole scope, some questions will come up.
So one of the big takeaways that we also did from this survey was use the Net Promoter Score for the first time as an agency. Now, Net Promoter is a question that you may have all taken part in before and not realized it. And it's this question: how likely would you be to recommend, in this case, riding VIA to a friend or neighbor? You may have gotten this. How likely would you be to recommend think of any company that might ask this question to a friend or neighbor? So the question gives us a score from a potential of -100 up to +100. And what we're really looking for are how many promoters, how many people do we have saying on a scale of 0 to 10, that there are a 9 or a 10. Those are what we consider our promoters. If you're a 7 or 8, you're passive. You don't necessarily get counted into the Net Promoter Score. And if you're a 6 or below, those are our detractors. So you want to, of course, have a positive score wherever possible. Every industry is going to have a slightly different score. So while we will look at how VIA's Net Promoter Score fits in with others throughout the country and across other industries, where that score ultimately lands is really dependent upon what the industry you're in. Or let me put it another way. This is some random samples of Net Promoter Scores based on organizations, again, provided to us by our TransPro contractors. Internet service providers, on average, have an NPS of 5%. Car rental agencies are about 18%. Airlines, pre-pandemic, are at 23%. Transit agencies, at least those that are reporting, the average is 32%, or an NPS of 32. Disney's at 50, and Costco is at 79. Now, please bear in mind, this is the first time VIA has ever undertaken an NPS. It will be a question we continue to ask every survey that we go out with from here on out. But what we found, and what our consultants were able to report to us, is our NPS score for the first time out the gate was actually higher than the transit industry average of 32. Actually, we were slightly higher than Disney at an NPS of 53 compared to the transit industry average of 32. Now, there are a number of transit properties across the country that have been using NPS. They've been tracking it for years, so they've got that history. So we did ask the question, where do we stand not only as the industry today, but also when Transpro in this case has looked at transit agencies that they work with, where's that first NPS score been? Because is a 53 abnormally high, abnormally low? Is it expected? And today, while we're 65% higher than the industry average, we're actually 104% higher than what they've seen as the average of the first time they've asked the NPS score in other markets. Normally, there's an NPS of 26. We came in at 53, and our 53 is not included in that industry wave of 26. One other just data point I wanted to also mention, and this was a survey that was just released about a week ago from the Transit app. So they provided their own NPS of systems that they've asked. They saw an NPS range going from -39, from -44 up in Edmonton, Canada, to an NPS score of 23 and in Miami-Dade. Now, we haven't had that system use our NPS score at this moment. Still need to see what their methodology was comparing across, but we are fairly pleased of such a high initial NPS score. Glad to pause here to take any questions that you may have at this moment before we get into the last section of this presentation. Mr. Day's got a question.
I don't have a question so much as I have a compliment, and that is normally what I see all around the United States when I go by a different transit agency. So today I'm in Dallas. As you can see, I'm on the Trinity Row Express, and compared to San Antonio, people don't really much like DART. They don't really like the way DART is run or operated, so on and so forth. So what do you call that word? I can't think of that word right now, that I can sort of confirm what the data is already showing from my personal experience.
Appreciate that, Mr. Day. Any other questions on the NPS, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone, I think a few people are aware, but is everyone comfortable and aware of the Net Promoter Score? If you want to go back very quickly, Leroy, I just kind of want to highlight this. Jeremy was there at Rackspace with me, and a few other folks are familiar with this. This is kind of a standard here. Actually, if you go all the way back to the scoring with the people showing, there you go. This is not just a general satisfaction of a thumbs up or thumbs down. In order to get to be called a promoter, when you fill out that survey, the respondents are basically saying it's a 9 or a 10. So even if somebody did a great job, and most people are very hard critics and saying, oh, hey, I like VIA, that's a 7. Those are actually passives. You consider them neutral. They're not one way or the other. So this isn't one of those types of systems that gives you a coin flip, you're good or you're bad. It is actually a very accurate representation because you have to score on the highest end possible. And it's weighted such that people, if you think about it, if you're kind of on the edge and something bad happens for a restaurant or anything, you're probably going to be a detractor. You're going to say like, yeah, don't go there. It's not a great place. Here's a better place that I've always had an amazing experience at. So just to give you some color and understanding of that, this isn't a coin flip. This isn't a best of 10. It's actually weighted in a really great way to just pull out that accuracy. And so the fact that VIA has performed above an industry average in this way, its first time out post-pandemic, my hat's off. Kudos, because that means you're paying attention to ridership and doing what you need to do every day for them, because excellence is determined through these things through consistency is what we saw. So the fact that these scores are there, that's really impressive.
Yeah, and to add to that, this is Jeremy. Another way that I also saw this when I was thinking about it, I was trying to think, how do you actually look at the scoring of a 9 or a 10 as success, and then should a 60 or 70 or 80 be just acceptable? If you think about it, I think one of the things that Fred Reichheld was the inventor of the NPS. He was on the board for Rackspace, and he comes from BCG, Boston Consulting Group, that think tank, right? And he talked about the idea that most companies are literally in the 60s and 70s, 60 and 70%, right? They're not doing so great. So being higher up is great, but when somebody's willing to give you a 9 or a 10, they're willing to tell their friend and actually recommend to their friend. Outside of that, it's just yeah, it's good, right? But if you think about what really is a 9 or a 10, they're actually willing to say, yes, I'm going to give my recommendation so you can come back to me and tell me, yeah, dude, you're completely wrong. Like I'm putting my reputation on the line when I give you that recommendation. So that's how I see the 9 or 10 versus like a 6, 7, or 8.
Appreciate that. One thing I did also want to highlight, I know I kind of glanced over this one, but to that point of the promoters minus the detractors, 64% of the respondents for the survey gave us a 9 or a 10. We had 10% that identified as a detractor, and we had that 26% that were passive. So we know we do have an opportunity to help move approximately 36% of our core ridership to a higher level as we move over the next few months and next couple of years when we look at rebalancing the VIA system. And they've also helped us identify what's most important to them that could have that good correlation between the agency's focus, reminding the community of the focus, and being able to see that translate into an upward trend on our NPS. And I'm not seeing any other hands, Mr. Chairman, so I'm going to go ahead and jump to the last component of this, which is what's feeding into getting that NPS score possibly higher and what the customers have told us is most important to them. So we had a series of options that people could answer, and everyone was allowed to choose their top 3. So a perfect score on this would have been 1,509. As you can see, we didn't break 600 in any of these responses, but frequency, hours of operation, and travel time were the 3 most important elements that customers told us mattered the most to them. When we look further down the list, and again, we recognize that these are our core riders, so some of the items that we might feel are important to the occasional rider, to the non-rider today, like trip planning and mobile applications, for example, our core ridership may not be using those because they are familiar with the system. They have other ways to get that information. Something we're going to be watching to see how this trend changes over the coming surveys as well. And so this is what TransPro provided for us. Based on looking at the correlation between an NPS score, the rankings the community's given, and some of the overall commentary offered by the community, they identified 6 areas of opportunity for us that focusing on those areas could have the highest potential to increase the customer experience and provide a higher level of satisfaction. And they include items that we've been working on as an agency. They should not be a surprise to anyone on the community council, because this was part of the messaging that we've been having for the last year and a half on Keep SA Moving. And it's focusing on frequency, both on weekdays and weekends, looking at the hours of operation on the weekend, on-time performance. So with our buses being in mixed traffic, like cars, how do we address that and handle that? And then while it's a positive, of course, the big area that we also saw that we could have, we could continue to watch and help invest in is the perception of our drivers being helpful and kind. And we consistently receive kudos for our drivers, but it's also telling us from our core ridership, that's the main person that they're interacting with, and it's helping form their opinion of VIA and our agency as a whole. Now, that's not to say we're going to ignore everything else we've been doing, but those are the areas that, at least through this first wave of the survey from TransPro on the core ridership, that's where we think we have the most opportunity to help shape that perspective in a positive direction moving forward. And so as John Gary mentioned a few moments ago, I wanted to also ask your help. We've had a good initial out of the gate response from the community, but we know to be able to keep delivering that and having that strong positive sentiment, we've got to recover our workforce. And so you hopefully have seen these mobile billboards on the side of our buses. You may have seen stuff on MySA or some of the other media sites that are out there. But we are actively hiring bus operators and bus mechanics. Starting pay for bus operators today is $20.25 an hour. And so please encourage everyone to go to our website, viainfo.net. They're able to apply for any of these positions or others that we have open in the agency. But being able to maintain this high customer satisfaction is incredibly dependent upon us being able to have that workforce in place that keeps service moving forward and that helps us keep all of our service on the street today. And with that, glad to take any other questions from the Community Council. And I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Day, you had a question?
Yes, sir. I have 3 questions. My first question is about, could you show this to several council members, specifically Jalen for D2? I noticed several tweets from him. He's at VIA. That's a nice way of saying it. The second question is, I noticed that the ridership is down, and I'm surprised that you guys find it surprising that people who make less than $10,000 are the majority of VIA riders. I've known that pretty much all my life for riding VIA. And I've noticed that that number is going to continue to go down because now where do people put the blue collar jobs? Okay. And those places are not in and around Loop 410 anymore. HEB opened it up on Foster Road, south between Rigsby and Houston Street. The Dollar General is also there on Foster Road. The majority of the Amazon warehouses are in Shirts. So if the blue collar workers are going out of service area, they're obviously not going to use the bus, except to maybe a special event or something.
And you had mentioned a third question, Mr. Day.
Oh, hold on. I'm bringing that third question up. Oh, I forgot the third question. My apologies.
No problem. So I will say that we are indeed sharing this information and these findings with council members as we meet with them. And so we will definitely have this conversation with Councilman McKee Rodriguez. As far as the point on the changing location of workforce, that is one of the reasons why we are doing everything we can to rebalance the system, but also looking at those additional transit options beyond just fixed route. So we can ensure that people do have the opportunity to get access to those jobs through our van pool program or through the VIA Link expansion that we're currently engaged with.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. Stuart, you had a question?
Yes. Hold on one second. I have a. I don't know if you. All right. Sorry about that. I had some noise in the background. Thanks for going through this this presentation, Leroy. This is really helpful. I was wondering, and this is just kind of a general question, and it's come up before. Is there a way that we can have access to these presentations before the meeting so we can review them and come up with some more informed questions beforehand, and maybe have them live somewhere?
Absolutely. That is one of the things we are working on. As you may notice, that our normal facilitator for the Community Council, John Tiemann, is no longer with us. And so we are going through I hate saying another reset, but another reset. And so in the coming weeks, we'll be having some of those discussions with the chair and the vice chair about what type of infrastructure we can bring to help give you access to presentations and briefing memos earlier than the day of the meeting.
Understood. Yeah, I know it's not always the easiest to shuffle things around, but yeah, it would be super helpful.
And did you have another question, Stuart? Was that the main?
That was the main question. I mean, I think this is just maybe, I guess, a piece of color that you perhaps already know is that, you know, those top three priorities, that's not just amongst riders, that's amongst people who choose not to ride the buses because of those top three factors. And so that's always, you know, that's the bread and butter of what transit does. It gets people from point A to point B. And so, you know, that's stuff to focus on regardless of whether people do want more trip planning tools. You know, it's these are always the drivers.
Absolutely. As our CEO likes to remind us, if real estate is location, 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 transit is absolutely frequency, frequency, and frequency.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stuart. Mr. Day, you had another question?
I just remembered my third question. I wanted to ask, how do we compare to systems like Kansas City, which offer its riders free transit service? Because the one thing I've noticed in places where there's a movement to make the transit free of charge is that the system agency doesn't want to really do the hard work and improve its system at all. And I just want to know how we rank against systems such as Denver, Los Angeles, because this is where I'm hearing the greatest call for free transit service from these cities. And from when you look into, except for Los Angeles, it's like the transit agency doesn't want to improve the system like VIA has strived to improve for the past 20 years.
So if I'm hearing that right, I just want to make sure you kind of got a little choppy there, but how do we compare against markets where there are free transportation and transit alternative or options that are presented at no cost to citizens, and then B, maybe larger markets in LA and other places that have, I guess, broader, but maybe don't have the focus on quality. They're just doing the quantitative delivery of service. Was that it?
No, it was, there's movements in the country to make transit free of charge. And I noticed that where they happen are in cities where the transit agency and the local leadership isn't doing anything to improve service.
Gotcha.
So Kansas City just made its transit free of charge, and I rode the system. I didn't really find anything wrong with it, but when I asked people, they complained about the buses being turned into adult daycare, for example, and people not being able to connect their buses, the bus drivers being rude to the people using the system.
Gotcha.
And I want to see how those fare up and see if what I'm observing from experiencing these places is that the data is holding up to what I'm experiencing.
John Gary, I think you were gonna got that. Okay.
Yeah, and Mr. Day, you're heading right down the path of where we hope this data not only takes us, but it establishes a priority and a line of communication with our riders. And in this case, this is our core riders, very core ridership that has stuck with us, that continues to ride with us. And ironically, these are the things that you look at as related to the value that they're receiving through their fare payment. And I know Dr. Alloway talked about that for a little bit. But I will also tell you that these are the core folks that least like free fare. For those reasons that you were talking about earlier, Mr. Day, is because it interrupts their ability to take the service by unneeded distractions that start happening on the vehicle from those folks that are not using the vehicle for transit purposes. And that's where we have to really have a balance here about free fare and free fare offerings is because of our core riders and keeping them focused. They're the groups that will complain the most when we do offer free ridership opportunity, because it is impacting on their experience as a customer. So if we continue to listen straight to our customers as we're going to continue to head down a path of delivering good service for a fare that's still one of the most affordable fares in the country at $1.30 one-way fare. So it is a balance. It is something that we watch, but we are definitely siding on the side of listening to our customers and taking their advice. And I think we're in a good position to do so.
Excellent. Any other questions or thoughts from this? I think there's a lot of really wonderful information for us to dive into the subcommittee and start kind of discussing and maybe dissecting a bit of this. And if there's further conversations that develop into ideas or maybe thoughts and feedback, we'll be able to share them here with the VTCC monthly meeting next month. And I will use that comment as a natural segue point into our monthly subcommittee reports. And I think what we'll do, Stuart, do you want to go ahead and go first and kick us off there?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you to those on the call who were there for our first subcommittee meeting a couple of weeks ago. It was exciting to see, this get off the ground, and with the understanding that it's something that's going to build the momentum over time. It is nice to have a good showing on the first meeting. So we had 8 members of VTCC and 4 via staff on the call. So we had some nice intros where we went around sharing more about us and where we want to see these subcommittees go. And then we also, Jeremy and I also shared some high-level vision. Leroy shared a bit about how VIA members would be involved. And then we spent some time discussing some of the key questions. So 2 that I think it would be worth mentioning now would just be, one question was on how the ideas would be generated and discussed, and the option to participate in both subcommittees. So to that second piece first, people are welcome to tune into both subcommittees. We just have to be cognizant of staying under the 10-member quorum that would actually make it an official VTCC meeting. So that's something I think we'll be able to get a better picture of as we go on, seeing how many people are joining these. There may be space for people to do both, but if there is a lot of interest, we may have to designate certain people for certain days. And the other piece is just around the idea generation, and also just a general thought about how does the VTCC subcommittees relate to the normal meetings, and then when the group should be brought in just in general. And that's something that, we had some discussion. Leroy shared a bit about how that's still an ongoing process, and especially with some of the transition pieces at VIA, that's something that's continuing to be being worked on. But it is definitely, I think, as we move forward with the subcommittees, we will have a better idea of the cadence of, okay, what comes from the subcommittee into the main committee meetings. That's what I would, Jeremy, anything to add to that? Oh, and actually one other thing I want to add is just, we talked about the dates for the next subcommittee meetings, which will be next Monday, the 20th for the community subcommittee meeting, and then the 27th, the following Monday, both at 4 p.m. for the policy meeting.
Yeah, and then I don't really have anything. It was a very thorough summary. I'm also going to try to attend Stuart's, and he's going to try to attend mine, just so we can just have make sure we're underneath the count. But yeah, just so we're both aware of what each other's reviewing in our own subcommittee meetings. But outside of that, I think today we have our first topic, so I was glad to really hear that one topic that we can discuss.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And I'm really excited about this because, both of you, kind of requested and stepped up into the leadership to do this, but I really do feel like there's going to be really, really great opportunities for conversation and ideation to come out of these sessions, especially when we get updates like this, where we can really sink our teeth into that and see where something that comes from, the policy component of VIA and the procedural and operations can actually play and bleed into where the community effort and other works can be touched and impacted. I have a feeling there's a ton of information in there that not a lot of people within certain communities that are looking at transit or alternative transportation options and trying to get their voice heard. That's like really great data, or that's data that they would typically maybe gloss over or be lost on a report. So I'm looking forward to these bits and bytes making their way into all of these communities that are going to be represented, and finding also interesting ways to engage with everyone, not only on this information, but what it creates for them. So thanks both of you for stepping in and helping lead the VTCC groups through those subcommittees. Thank you. All right. And Adriana, I will turn this over to you, our next topic.
Okay. So what I'm seeing here is issues. Yeah, I think in terms of future meetings, I know that there had been discussion and want to turn these into person or in-person meetings. I would think for the foreseeable future that we should just keep these via Zoom. I'm open for conversation to that either way, but that's where I'm just leaning in terms of, just keeping these virtual until things are safer.
Absolutely, thank you. One other kind of piece to note here, as we head into our holiday kind of fall and everything else. I think we can all agree this has been another crazy year, an unexpected 2021, certainly from some of us, when we thought 2020 was going to put some of these things in the rear view. One of the things that I'd like to just kind of put in front of everybody, and just to think about a little bit, is there's some work that VIA does, and it's VIA Cares. They run some campaign, and it's really connecting to ridership. And I had the thought that as we kind of head into the holiday season, and as we start getting more awareness around ridership and updates and what's going on, what's working, what's not, or anything else, if we come up with an opportunity for engagement or promotion, or just kind of sharing some thoughts as the VTCC, to go out and maybe put a request in with VIA about that, the CARES campaign, and if there's something that we can do to be a part of that, I thought that might be a really great way for us to engage with our community during, kind of as we head into the fall and closing out the year. And also just maybe not necessarily always about policy and always about what's going on around transportation, but just the fact that we're neighbors and, and we're representing and we're trying to help them out. So if there are ideas about what that looks like, or maybe next month, if there's interest, please discuss this in the subcommittees, and your subcommittee leaders will boil this up for us. But if you have ideas and you think this would be a great way, and you want to know a little bit more about VIA Cares, we can get that information from them during our next VTCC meeting, or ideally maybe a little bit before, and we can share that with everybody. But I just encourage, if we can come up with a great idea to engage our community and ridership in a unique way, representative of VTCC, and on behalf of VIA or in collaboration with them, I think that might be a really great way for us to connect to riders, community, and have a little fun with the end of the year stuff that's been going on after a really tough year. Just throwing that out there for everybody to consider. Are there any issues or other thoughts or comments that anyone would like to add for next month's meeting? Yeah, Mr. Day. Go ahead, Dana. You have your hand up.
Oh, sorry about that. I had to unmute.
Oh.
I have a question. could we meet in an outdoor location just to get together on a sunny day? Because COVID doesn't like sunlight. And maybe, I don't know if you guys can find the information that proves that, but it seems like going outdoors does prevent the virus from spreading to other individuals, or at least the people who had the shot come together and well, meet each other like at a park or something.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll find a way to talk a little bit more about that. Again, I think from a health and safety concern, I definitely I would love for us to do that, but I think following VIA's guidance and guidelines as well, I think right now what we want to do is kind of press pause on it. But maybe that's something we can meet up as a subcommittee and see if there's an interest in just individuals meeting, not for VTCC or any other component. There's opportunities to do that. But I think for proper VTCC meetings, we're going to go ahead and wait and just err on the side of caution, and in an abundance of caution, continue to do these virtually through the end of 2021.
Okay. That's literally the only thing I can think of right now. Also, I'll send an email about bus stop situations on North Alamo tonight. So please be on the lookout for those.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. Thanks for the engagement today as well. Really much appreciated. If there are no other comments, is there a motion to adjourn this afternoon's meeting?
Move. Yeah. Motion.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we will see you in the subcommittees. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.